Ever stumble upon an idea from, way back that still just clicks today? We're doing a deep dive into some ancient wisdom, looking at parts of Surah Yunus. It's chapter 10 of the Quran. And here's something that really caught my attention. One verse hints that once upon a time, all of humanity was like one community. Makes you think about our shared roots, doesn't it?
It really does. It's quite a thought, especially looking at the world now, how diverse it is. These verses from Surah Yunus, they give us a fascinating glimpse into the worldview presented in the Quran. Gets right into the big questions: who are we? Why are we here?
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together these excerpts to really get into what they say about, well, the nature of God, or Allah is referred to here, and also our purpose as humans, and the outcomes linked to our choices, belief versus disbelief. The aim is to break down these core ideas for you, make them clear and hopefully pretty engaging.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Starting big picture. What does this text tell us about the divine, about Allah?
Well, right from the start, the verses lay out a very powerful understanding of Allah. Take verse 3. It says, surely your Lord is Allah, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and then rose over Istawa the throne, disposing the affair of all. No intercessor can plead with him except after his leave. What's really striking is that immediate statement of Allah's unique power, the creator, but also an absolute control. That phrase, rose over the throne, Istawa, it signifies this complete sovereignty. It's a really central concept.
Right, so it's not like create and then step away. The text says disposing the affair of all. It sounds like constant involvement and active management, and that bit about no intercessor except by his permission, that really underlines the direct line between, well, us and God. How does that compare to other perspectives?
That's a really key point in this framework. It stresses direct accountability, a direct relationship. You don't necessarily rely on intermediaries. And verse 4 builds right on that. To him is the return of all of you. The promise of Allah is true. It is he who begins the creation and then will repeat it, that he may reward with justice those who believed and did deeds of righteousness. But those who disbelieved will have a drink of boiling fluids and painful torment because they used to disbelieve. So here you see the whole cycle: creation, recreation, the certainty of being held accountable, and these starkly different fates.
The idea of creation being repeated, it sounds like there's a real purpose behind it all, right? And the imagery is intense boiling fluids versus, well, we hear later about gardens for believers. The text also uses the natural world as evidence, doesn't it? Like night and day, the sun, the moon.
Exactly. Verses 5 and 6 point us towards that natural order. It is he who made the sun a shining thing and the moon as a light, and measured out for its stages that you might know the number of years in the reckoning. It goes on to say, Allah explains these signs, or ayat, for people who have knowledge, and that the cycle of night and day, everything created, holds signs for people who are mindful of Allah. So these predictable cosmic patterns, they're not just random. They're presented as signs of divine wisdom, part of a grand design. Calculating time isn't just practical. It points to something bigger.
So basically, everything we see, everything we experience, creation, time, even the results of our actions, it all points back to Allah. And the message is, we're all returning to him eventually. Verses 4 and 56 remind us of that. It is he who gives life and causes death, and to him you all shall return. A complete journey with clear endpoint. Now, a really core idea here is the oneness of Allah, Islamic monotheism, Tawheed. The text hits this point hard repeatedly.
Oh, absolutely. The emphasis on Allah's absolute oneness is woven throughout these selections. Like we saw, verse 4 mentions it explicitly. And later, verse 19 says quite plainly, mankind were but one community, then they differed. This idea of an original unity, maybe rooted in that monotheism, is fascinating. Then the text directly challenges the whole idea of associating partners with Allah. Verse 18 talks about people worshiping things that harm them not, nor profit them. It's basically questioning the logic of idolatry.
And it directly calls out those who make those claims, right?
Yeah.
Verses 31, 34, 35, they ask these kinds of rhetorical questions like, is there any partner you worship who can originate creation and then repeat it? Or who can guide to the truth? It's a really effective way of highlighting the perceived powerlessness of anything worshipped besides Allah.
Precisely. It's like a logical breakdown of polytheism within this context. And then verse 61 offers this sense of comfort, perhaps, letting believers know that nothing is hidden from Allah, not even the weight of an atom, anywhere. It's all recorded. It speaks to this total, all-encompassing awareness. And verse 65 adds, let not their speech grieve you, for all power and honor belong to Allah.
So what we're seeing is a picture of the divine as the one and only creator, sustainer, infinitely knowledgeable, infinitely powerful. The ultimate truth, as verse 32 puts it, such as Allah, your Lord in truth, is a very complete vision. Okay, let's shift gears a little. What about humanity's place in this picture? What does Surah Yunus say about our role, our purpose?
Well, the text starts by acknowledging how people reacted when the revelation came through a human messenger. Verse 2 mentions this. Is it a wonder for mankind that we have sent our revelation to a man from among themselves? It says the purpose was to warn mankind and give good news to those who believe. But then it notes the disbelievers calling the messenger a sorcerer. So right away, it highlights the role of prophets in bringing this divine guidance to people. And our main purpose, based on this, seems to be believing in Allah's oneness and the message brought by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And that belief, it's not just thinking something, right? It's tied to actions. Verses 7 to 9 seem to spell out different destinies based on what we do. Those who don't hope for the meeting with God, who are happy with just this life, their end is the fire. But then those who believe and do deeds of righteousness, their Lord will guide them. Under them will flow rivers in the gardens of delight. It's a very clear link. Faith, good deeds, reward.
Exactly. Verse 9 explicitly says Allah guides those who believe and do good works. Guidance itself is presented as a result of faith and action. But the text is also realistic about human nature. Verse 11 points out how we tend to rush towards bad things, just like we rush towards good things. It suggests impatience, maybe not seeing the bigger picture. And verse 13 reminds us about past generations who rejected clear signs, serving as a kind of historical warning.
Like history repeats itself if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And then there's that really interesting point in verse 19 we touched on. Mankind were but one community, then they differed.
Yeah.
What are some ways people understand that initial unity?
Well, within Islamic thought, interpretations vary. Some see it as a kind of original state of belief in one God, like a natural human inclination that got distorted over time. Others might see it as just a shared human experience before cultures and beliefs really diverged. But either way, it points to this idea of an underlying unity that got broken. Then verses 21 to 23 get into how we react to things, blessings, and hardships. When things are good, we apparently often plot against God's signs. It suggests a tendency towards maybe ingratitude or defiance.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And the parable in verse 24 about worldly life, comparing it to rain, making plants grow, but then they just wither away, really drives home how temporary it all is. And that's set against the abode of peace, paradise, promised in verse 25 for those who listen to Allah's call and do good.
So this life is short, maybe a kind of test, while the afterlife is what's real and lasting. And it all comes down to our choices and actions now. Verse 30 drives that home, the individual accountability. There. Every person will know exactly what he had earned before. And they'll be brought back to Allah, and any false gods will just disappear. There's no getting away from it.
That's absolutely critical. The accountability is personal, total. Nothing gets missed, like verse 61 said. The Quran itself, in verse 57, is presented as good advice, a healing for what is in your breasts, basically guidance and mercy for believers. So following that guidance is key to fulfilling our purpose. The core message given to the Prophet in verses 104 and 105 is basically, worship only Allah, don't associate partners with him.
Right. So the heart of our purpose is recognizing Allah's oneness, following the guidance given, living righteously, all looking towards the afterlife, and accepting that whether things are good or bad, it's ultimately from Allah, as verse 107 says. If he sends harm, only he can remove it. If he intends good, no one can stop his favor.
Yeah.
And we're told to be patient, stick to the guidance until Allah judges. That's verse 109.
Precisely. Patience and sticking to the path until the end.
Okay, now let's look at the flip side. What does Surah Yunus say about disbelief, about its consequences? It's pretty direct about that too.
Oh, very direct. That warning of a painful torment for disbelievers comes right near the beginning, in verse 4. Verse 17 adds that people who invent lies about Allah or reject his signs, they won't succeed. And the day of judgment, in verses 28 and 29, is described as this time when those who worshipped others besides Allah will be gathered, and their false gods will actually deny them. A moment of profound humiliation. Verse 33 confirms Allah's word is just, but then notes, rather starkly, that most of the people will not believe. It suggests disbelief is common, even with a clear message.
And it seems like that disbelief often stems from just not understanding or maybe willfully rejecting the truth. Verse 39 talks about people denying something before they really grasped it and only understanding when the punishment actually arrives. It's like ignoring warnings until it's too late.
Exactly that. And the regret of the wrongdoers on that day is mentioned again and again, like in verses 45 and 54. Verse 50 highlights how suddenly the torment can hit. And verses 51 and 52 show the disbelievers being asked about the torment after it's already happening. A kind of tragic irony there. Ultimately, verse 54 talks about the ultimate loss for those who deny God's signs. Verse 70 repeats the consequences for inventing lies or rejecting revelations.
The text also uses historical stories to make these points, doesn't it? Stories of prophets and how people reacted to them.
Yes, absolutely. The excerpts mention Noah and the flood in verse 73, and the story of Moses and Pharaoh comes up in verses 75, 83, and then again later. And in the story of Pharaoh drowning, verse 92 specifically says his body was saved as a sign for future generations, like a physical historical warning against rejecting God's message.
Wow, that's quite an image. A preserved body is a lesson through time. The text also talks about when belief matters, doesn't it? Like, there's a point where it might be too late.
Right. Verses 90 and 91 about Pharaoh trying to believe as he drowned, and later verses 97 and 98, they emphasize that belief really counts before the punishment becomes unavoidable. Once it's happening, the sincerity is questionable. But there's a really interesting exception mentioned in verse 98, the people of Jonah, or Yunus, who the surah is named after. When they saw the punishment coming, they genuinely believed, and Allah actually held back the torment for a while. It shows Allah's mercy and willingness to accept repentance even at the 11th hour, if it's sincere.
So even when discussing consequences, there's still this element of hope, this emphasis on divine mercy. But the main takeaway seems clear. Belief in doing good leads to reward. Disbelief in rejecting the signs leads to, well, a painful outcome. And ultimately, it's on us, as verse 44 says. Truly, Allah wrongs not mankind in aught, but mankind wrong themselves.
That's a fundamental point. The responsibility lies with individual choice. Verse 47 reminds us that every community got a messenger, and judgment will be fair. No one is treated unjustly. The way disbelievers are described as trying to rush the punishment in verses 50 and 51 kind of underscores their lack of understanding, maybe a false bravado. And in the end, like verses 81 and 82 state in the context of Moses and the magicians, truth prevails and falsehood disappears. Surely falsehood is ever bound to vanish.
That's a strong note to end on. So just to quickly recap this dive into parts of Surah Yunus, we've seen this really consistent message about God's absolute nature, Allah, as the one creator, all-powerful, all-knowing, the ultimate truth. Humanity's purpose, to believe in this oneness, follow the guidance, live righteously. And the consequences of our choices are huge. Eternal reward for believers who act on their faith, and severe punishment for those who disbelieve and reject the message.
Yeah, and these ideas, even though from an ancient text, they really give you a framework for thinking about the big questions: existence, purpose, accountability.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it, about the implications of living in a world where this kind of clear guidance is presented. You know, what does it mean to live life with this understanding? And what are those lasting questions we all wrestle with, considering these ideas about a divinely set path and the sheer weight of our choices in deciding our own destiny? Definitely food for thought.